All right, and we got a Patreon poll, Ian. How do you access the CU Podcast Patreon?
You go to patreon.com/CU Podcast.
And you get some writing from Ian there once a week. He's going to post something, hopefully.
Yep. And then we do hangouts. I did a hangout last Sunday. It was good.
Was it good hangout?
It was a good hangout.
I didn't pop in. I forgot.
Some new faces. New face.
New faces?
It was like 4 or 5 of us, and there was a new face. Yes. Charlie, I believe his name was. It's nice to meet you, Charlie.
Oh, Charlie. What a nice name. My grandfather's name.
Yeah. That was a good name. So, yeah, it was fun. Full video podcast. These poll topics.
Yes,
we do poll topics.
And I do not have... Wow, I'm really dropping the ball. I do not have the percentages in place. I went back to 3. In third place, 13%. Wow, that's bad. What retro game deserves the Battle Royale treatment a la Super Mario 35? In second place, we just did it. How will we view the Wii U in 20 years closer to the Virtual Boy or Dreamcast? Good thing didn't win, but that was 40%. That was strong. And in first place, Ian, it's a what if, which you don't like to do. What would the video game world look like if Nintendo never existed? This will either be a disaster or fun. Maybe both.
Well, I think, first of all, the big video game mascot would be Lee the Leather Boot, the Coleco, the Coleco mascot.
Was that real? You mean Lee the
No.
They must have had a Coleco Connecticut Leather Company mascot, though.
I'm trying to
Coleco
picture
mascot.
what the big mascots would be if Nintendo never existed.
Well, you still have Sonic? You still have Sonic?
Still have Sonic, yeah. But someone would have had to have taken Nintendo's place.
It could have been a Popeye game still. Could have had Popeye in there.
Could have had Popeye. I wonder if Nintendo didn't exist, would
Alex Kidd would have taken the reins and around with it?
I do think Alex Kidd may have.
No, I wouldn't have. No,
I do think Alex Kidd might have been a little bit more popular.
Alex Kidd's terrible.
Alex Kidd with his elf
monkey
ears.
good looks. Was he a monkey or an elf? We don't know.
No, I do wonder how quickly we would have moved into more complex story-based games if Nintendo had not existed.
Versus a quick arcade type of games.
Yes, and I always think in my mind, because this is one of those questions I think that, people throw out there every once in a while. I think we would have been looking at quicker score-based, arcade-based stuff for a lot longer. Nintendo's home console, it got what's the stuff that really made it popular? Super Mario Brothers, Zelda, Metroid, games like that, games where Kid Icarus, games that took multiple hours to complete, games that gave you passwords so that you could come back and finish them later. I don't think we necessarily would have transitioned into those deeper experiences as quickly.
Certainly not through Atari, because they're still pumping out the fucking 3rd or 4th version of Pole Position in the late 80s. Oh, you got your Pac-Man for 2600. Now get it for the 5200. Now get it for the 7800. It's like, can you evolve a little bit what we're experiencing here? They're still stuck in the arcades,
right?
About that's how video games should be. And it's like you have to do something different at some point.
Exactly. And even Sega, say the Sega Master System had, some RPGs and stuff like that, but Sega themselves were still largely focused on arcade stuff. Sure, they had Phantasy Star, but, their big hits for the Genesis early on were things like Space Harrier 2, that was like the original pack-in, or not the original pack-in.
Space Harrier 2.
Yeah, Space Harrier 2.
That was an early one. Altered Beast, though, was a pack-in.
Altered Beast was the first pack-in, but that's an arcade. You had the sports games, and then you had even their stuff that wasn't in the arcade. You had stuff like Streets of Rage, which was obviously imitating stuff like Fatal Fury, or not Fatal Fury, Final Fight, and Sonic the Hedgehog.
Well, let's take it back a little earlier, because by that point, at least the NES was dominating. So Master System, we look at the Master System library, there's not a lot you can look at that probably wasn't either influenced by Nintendo or maybe Phantasy Star. It's like, well, there was also PC games that were role-playing games. So it's hard to even look at the Master System and be like, wow, they're trying to do something a huge amount different, because there's still like arcade games, sports games. There's not that sort of killer game. Alex Kidd in Miracle World tries to be Super Mario Brothers, but they probably only made Alex Kidd because of Super Mario Brothers. You know what I mean? That's probably what influenced it. So it's hard to see what would have happened with Sega.
The first Zillion's a little bit deeper, but yeah, no, overall, I
Alex Kidd in Miracle World. When did that game fucking come out? November 1st, 86. So that game was probably a direct response to Super Mario Brothers. We need a Super Mario Brothers. We
Right.
do. They saw that come out a year before, like, we need a game like that to sell our console.
So
It's tough. It might have. I'll say this: we were talking about the crash. How quickly would we have come back from the crash without Nintendo for consoles in the 80s? Would have taken like 6, 7, 8 years to
Right.
get there. Would have taken until the Sega Genesis to eventually come out and be like, okay, we're doing something radically different from these crappy Atari retreads and the 8th version of Pac-Man. We want to play something besides Missile Command. Well, here Sonic would, but Sonic was a response to Mario. So it's like without Nintendo, the landscape could have been entirely different. And now, computer, it might have been the same exact.
right, I
progression.
think with computer you would have seen a very similar progression, and that's what I was going to end this on. Is that I think we would have, when you look at stuff like especially like the Xbox or the Sony systems, I think we probably would have ended up getting here anyways, because a lot of the more modern systems are more taking their cues from PC gaming than they were previous generations of
Sure.
console gaming or arcade gaming. So I think we would have gotten here eventually.
But 80s
that,
and 90s.
But the in-between era would have been very
Weird.
different. Yeah.
Would there have been another company that would have swept in and tried to do the Disneyification kind of and succeeded? Because obviously, Sega. Well, maybe Sega wouldn't have went for the teenage audience. Maybe they would have went for the kids if Nintendo wasn't there, or maybe
Right.
Atari would have, on the 7th round attempt, been successful. After the 8th time they've tried to come out with a console that was too old and no one
Right.
wanted, would they have been successful? Remember, they were still trying to sell the 2600 in the late 80s, under $50. They were trying to sell a 12-year-old console in the late 80s at a discount. It's
Yeah.
not even the 7800. That was here and gone. Like that was.
I can't remember which game it was, but I picked up an Atari game at Luna the one day because it had like a really nice label on it. It was really clean, and I looked at it, and it was 1989.
Yeah.
1989 was the date printed on the fucking label.
They went to like 90 on
Holy shit.
Atari games. 90 or maybe 91. They went a long time, but no one was playing them in this country, at least, maybe in South America or somewhere
Right.
else. But yeah, well, who would have taken up the torch and try to be as bold? Because you give Nintendo crap. They were bold. Almost every console, they try to do something different. They tried to do something different with the NES. They threw Rob on there. They gave you a zapper gun. They tried to make it entertaining, and it worked. Super Nintendo was just sort of that logical progression, but then N64, they tried to do something radically different, and it semi-worked. GameCube was kind of different. Wii was really different. Wii U was really different and failed. Virtual Boy was really different and failed, and then Switch is really different and it's done great. So, yeah, it's tough. I think that mid 80s to late 90s era would have been weird as hell. Would have been weird.
Yeah, very strange.
Maybe Sony would have stepped in and bid like the Nintendo sort of like company. Maybe they would have been like, where are the people to do this? Or maybe Sega would have done it. But not with fucking Alex Kidd. Not with Alex Kidd. There's a reason we're not seeing Alex Kidd open up theme parks in Japan. There's a reason we're not seeing that. All right, is that it for this podcast?
That's it for this podcast.
What was it? Coleco's
Lee the leather boot.
Lee the leather boot? Is he talk? Is he like a Monopoly little guy, a little boot from Monopoly?
Yeah, he
talks?
He looks kind of like the Bill on Capitol Hill, but add a boot bottom to it.
What was your combination of two different? You combined Rocky the Rodent and another one about a year.
Oh,
or
I
two.
think I said Rocky Possum.
You combine.
Yeah, Rocky
you combine
Possum, Awesome Possum and Rocky the Rodent.
Rocky
Yeah,
Possum.
Rocky Possum.